Udat team. And today we are going to take the opportunity to talk with you about the consultation process, or at least to provide an overview of the consultation process for EAA services, or more commonly known as home modification. And what we really want to do today is kind of highlight our collaboration with Missouri Inclusive Housing and go over some more of the specific assistance that can be provided, some of the experiences we've had since the development of our team and what we feel has been successful and has really contributed to the successful outcome of utilizing this service. So I'm joined today with Chris Rodriguez, who is here and currently works with home modifications with Missouri Inclusive Housing. So to begin, we'll give the little quick where, what, who, when, why of the EAA service and why it's become such a focus. So as many of you know, part of our organizational efficiency, there was the development of the Udat team, which is Universal Design and Assistive Technology. The universal design is specific to the area or focus of EAA services and the home and vehicle modification. So last December, we implemented a consultation process that is available to anyone who is requesting EA services. We also provide technical assistance at any time. It can be just a quick question. It could be multiple questions, but we do have a specific consultation process that is that we do provide that will be a more thorough review of documentation and plans. So with that EAA consultation services, as I stated, it can be for anybody who's requesting EAA services. But we do have a requirement that any service request over $5,000 would be reviewed by our team. And this was developed to ensure that we're using statewide consistency in service delivery of EAA, and as well as to ensure that we have completion of jobs with optimal satisfaction for families and individuals. And this also allows us to provide guidance and education along the way for not only providers and service coordinators, but also for families of what to expect in the process. So one of the things when you begin with the consultation process, we're going to ask that you provide us with an Otp evaluation, the bid or bids that were received for that with that request, and then of course the ISP. And within those three documentations, we're going to review to ensure that there is matching language in all. So for instance, if the OTPT is recommending a roll-in shower, we're going to be sure that the bid also mimics that. We don't want to see that they're installing a bathtub when it was specific to a roll-in shower. We're also going to be sure that the ISP addresses those same issues and that there's justification for the need of that service. So what I will do here in a minute is we'll go to the website, because we do have tools that will review each one of these and some actual sample tools that you can utilize when doing in that planning process. The other thing we look at in our initial consultation is to ensure that the modification provides increased independence in accessing the home. And we're doing this to fit within the waiver definition. Sometimes we see that there are home modification requests that are actually more typical maintenance or repair jobs, or maybe they also go in line with what we would consider prohibitive practices as for the division in general. And so we want to be sure that the request actually fits in within that waiver definition. So some examples might be that we'll go back to that walk-in shower. There may be a request for a walk-in shower because that individual is not able to utilize that shower for their daily hygiene or some of their daily needs. That is something that seems to be a legitimate request through home modification. One that may not be a request that we would want to approve is something because the current shower is not working. We consider that to be a home repair, and that would not fall under this category. So we do want to go through and make sure that every request is within the waiver definition. And again, we stress that the waiver definition does provide increased independence in accessing their home. So there may be times when, although that is a need in their home, it may not fit the definition and it would fall under a typical home repair or typical maintenance for that homeowner. So it is hard to generalize exactly what is covered and what isn't, because every request is unique in nature. It's unique to an individual need, and that's exactly how it's supposed to work. So we do look at this more thoroughly and ensure that this is present when we go through that consultation process. We may also provide during this process some reminders or recommendations, and recommendations could be that there was mismatched language between those three documents. It could be that there's not enough clarity in the bid, or it could be that we feel like there are some cracks or areas that would allow for an unsuccessful outcome. And so we may ask that those be reviewed or more information be provided. We also may give reminders that are as simple as ensuring that this is not provider owned or controlled, that this is within the cap of the waiver, or that even the landlord has given permission for use of the service in their home. So there are a lot of different ways that we can go through the process, but those 3 documents will be the most significant in ensuring that we have the information we need to help you and help guide along that process. So once you've gone through that, there may be a very easy request, and you may find that once we go through that initial process and we look at the components, the required components, everything is in place and you can go on to the next phase, which would be for UR review. And I do want to highlight that we are not UR, we are not going to approve this service, but we're going to ensure everything is in place for that UR review. So if you hear back from us, we've done our review and everything's ready for that next step, you will go on to that UR review and they will make the determination if that service is approved. If this is maybe one of more complex nature and we see that there's a lot of different detailed oriented projects, or maybe it's something that we can see that there's been some experiences with it before that we perhaps need to provide some different guidance. We very well at this point may bring in Missouri Inclusive Housing. So we meet with them weekly to review some of these situations and to review some of these requests. And that gives us an opportunity to brainstorm on some of the recommendations, but it also gives us an opportunity to utilize their services and how they can assist in some of those projects where there are some concern or there's been some trouble trying to get it to work out. We know that construction is just not as easy as what it looks like in paper, and sometimes in application those things start to divulge some problem areas. So this is an area where we can really bring in Missouri Housing and they can bring in some more detailed direct support. And I'm actually going to turn that over to Chris to let him go into some more detail about the role that they play in that process.
Thank you, Shelley, and good afternoon, everyone. As Shelley mentioned, the process with the home modifications, when there is consultation, those are going to first be reviewed at the Udat group. And at that point, if there are some complications or there's some specific request, then that can get referred to Mo Housing, and that's where I come in. My job primarily as consulting on these is I'm going to request like the OT or PT evaluation and any bids. And a lot of times before it even goes to bids, Mo Housing is going to look at the PT and the ISP to ensure it's complete and all the information is there, and then it coincides with the ISP and the needs. At that point, we look to make sure it's very clear that if a contractor gets OTPT evaluation, that they clearly know what they're going to be bidding on at that time. And so it's real important that we look at that prior to the contractors, if there's any questions or there's something new or something different that may come up in the bids. Also, I just want to mention too, while we're on the call, is that on August 23rd, Jason Elmore, who's also on the Universal Design and Assistive Technology group, he and I are going to be doing a training with PT and OTs who are contracted with the state and others that have been providing those evaluations, just to review what some of the needs are that we have prior to those evaluations going to contractors. So one thing to keep in mind when you get the PT-OT evaluation is that not all contractors may be familiar with language or verbiage that's used in an OT-PT evaluation. So it's really important that we communicate clearly as to what modifications are going to be needed and any specifics around that area. At that point, when those go out and the bids come back, we try to work side by side with you once we're been requested to do the consultation, and we'll look at those bids and the consultation from the PT-OT to make sure that they coincide and that they're comparable to the outcomes that are for the home modification are clearly identified and that also the contractor is bidding on those modifications that need to be there. Also, whenever there's modifications done, of course, there's other things that need to happen sometimes with electrical, plumbing, flooring, different things like that. And so we want to clearly look at all those things to make sure that they are in line with the home modification and are going to meet all the requirements around the home modification process. This way we don't run into problems later on after the project's completed or there's a price increase or something like that. And one of the things, I mean, most of us know this right now. If any of you've had to do any work or order anything, there's some things around products that sometimes are delayed. And so we're going to be needing to recognize that sometimes those things may not happen within a week or 2 weeks, but we want to work with that contractor to ensure that we can get the project done as quickly as possible. I think the other thing to remember too is that not all these contractors, this may not be their primary work. And so we have to work closely with them in the time frames when the products come in and the family to ensure that they can get the modification done once they get those products in a timely manner. So once those, just a kind of a quick overview, we've been involved in a number of projects. I go on site if requested to meet with the support coordinators. I'll meet with the families and the contractors together. We'll look and see what the plans are for the modification and the project. So everybody understands and they have a very clear picture of what's going to be happening with that home modification. And that's really important, especially those projects that are fairly involved or complicated, that the family understand what's going to be happening. It is their home. They're understanding what's going to be happening to their home, how that contractor is going to work, and what that final modification is going to, how it's going to be able to support the individual based on what's been recommended. We've also invited at times the physical therapist or the occupational therapist to join us because sometimes the structure of the home will not accommodate what was mentioned in the evaluation. So it's real important that we sit down to look at that to see if there's other options and that the PT or OT is in agreement with those and can amend the OTPT evaluation because that's what the providers and the contractors are going to be evaluated on when it's finalized, is that they met all those outcomes and with the items that the PTOT had recommended at that time. The planning, we're here to support you. We'll work side by side, even if the ISP, the PT and OT evaluation needs to be somewhat redesigned to meet the requirements of the EAA service prior to it, as Shelley mentioned, prior to it going to utilization review. So we try to clean up everything prior to it going there so that we know and the utilization review team knows exactly what's going to be taking place and it's very clearly spelled out. We've had some really good luck lately, I guess luck, but we've had some really good involvement with a few of the projects, and those that seem to be successful are those where we meet with everyone when we get that consultation and just walk through the whole project, make sure everything is ready to go and prior to going to utilization review, and that the project and the contractor can get started on those. I do want to mention if you are currently involved in a project, that it's really important that people are observing or checking in with the family to ensure that the work that is being done is what is all agreed upon. And if any time that is a situation that comes up that there's a disagreement or a dispute over something, if you would please give us a call as soon as possible, because we'd like to get involved prior to the project or prior to people having some disagreements about how the project's going so that we can go in and help facilitate the rest of that process to get it completed, because the only one that's going to really end up not being supported is the individual if they're continuing to wait because there's a holdup or there's a dispute about something in the home. And we have some that have happened prior to the utilization or prior to the Udat group coming in. There were a number of home modifications that had been going on for, we found out, for a year or 2 years. And we've had to go in and do some mediation and facilitation with providers and families to ensure that we can get the project completed. And so we want to try and avoid those in the future. I think the Udat team has been very, very beneficial in remediating a lot of those situations that have come up and getting people the supports that they need with their home modifications. I think at this time, like I said, there's going to be things in the chat box that has the Universal Design group's email in there. That's the first place to start. If you have any questions about your home modifications, I've also included the Missouri Inclusive Housing website and the email that's in there. If you need to contact us, that's fine, but we prefer that you go through, if it's on home modification, we prefer that you contact the Universal Design group first. And then that way we kind of keep track of what's going on, and we meet weekly with those projects that are going on, so we can stay on top of those and support the folks out there that need us. I think at this time, Shelley, I turn it back over to you to kind of go over some of the flow charts and different things like that on how things work.
Right. So one area we also know is that, we do have that consultation once you've acquired bids and once you've acquired your OTPT and those things. But we also recognize that sometimes there needs to be some assistance just in the planning process. So absolutely contact us at any time during that process. We'll be more than happy to assist you in that. And we've also tried to develop some tools that are available on the website. And I'm going to quickly just go over to where those are located so that you can browse through them yourself or utilize them if need be. So we've located them under case management providers. And if you look under planning and ISP development, we get the first spot there. So you can see from the list of documents here, you're getting started is going to be an overview of our process as well as with the waiver definition and some of the things that we can offer you as a service to the team. We have a home modification flow chart that I'll just quickly bring up, and it's going to actually help the service coordinator go through what the next steps should be. And then what the process is if it comes through a consultation or when you may need to acquire some extra assistance. I've got too many screens open. Let me pull these down a little bit. We also have located there, I went too far, the OTPT evaluation. This is actually a tool that can be used. We do recognize that most OTPTs have their own agency tool that is used, which is totally appropriate. But this tool is actually going to allow you to see the content that is required. And so you can go through this and begin to understand what to expect when you do get an OTPT review, even if it isn't this identical form. And this will help you also do some of the planning because you can see the content that will be required in the evaluation. We also have this for a bid tool. That you can see that providers can use. Again, most often they do have their own bid estimate tool, but this will show you exactly what is utilized and what required criteria needs to be included in their bid. And then maybe most importantly is this final walkthrough checklist. One thing that we know is we don't have direct contact with the family in this process. So we'll be working with the service coordinator, the provider, contract provider, and OTPT provider. So it's really important that the service coordinator still serves as that hub of the communication. And one of those things that we have noticed is the service monitoring aspect of home mod can be difficult sometimes because it seems like it's such a foreign world. And so we're not asking, of course, for anybody to go in and approve a construction job or to validate that the construction was done appropriately or that it was done within compliance of permit codes and other things like that. But what we do want to do is make sure that there is constant contact to ensure that there is satisfaction with the process as it's going. So some projects may need really increased amounts of service monitoring, and other projects may not need quite as intense. But just as like you do with the residential service and you go out and do a monthly service monitoring, this one is going to require a service monitoring for completion of the project. And this final walkthrough is something that you can use as a checklist to kind of go through and see if this is something that is done to satisfaction of all those who are involved in the process. We think best practice is always to have this final walkthrough with the family, individual, the construction contractor, as well as with the service coordinator, so that we are all on the same page of anything that needs resolution. And this also allows everybody to have the opportunity to go through and ask questions or receive additional feedback and some of the warranty or manufacturer information that may be associated with that home modification. We also find at this phase that sometimes there is the walkthrough or perhaps through the process, we encounter that something has gone wrong. The modification is not going the way the family had interpreted, or the OTPT interpretation looks differently than the bid. And so what we want to do is our consultation process is really designed to try to offset those opportunities from occurring. But if that does happen, we do want to be able to provide mediation as quickly as possible, because when we can try to get in there and make sure everybody's on the same page, then hopefully we can complete that project before we get to the point where everybody has walked away. So one of the things I'm going to have Chris talk through as well is some things that he has seen in that mediation process. He has actually gone out to provide that when not everybody is on board. Not everybody has the same satisfaction level at the end of a project. And so he's going to talk a little bit about some of those mediation services that he can provide as a neutral party.
Okay. And one quick thing I wanted to mention too before I talk about that is that on the bid that Shelley put up there earlier, there's 2 sheets on that bid on the sample bid. And one of the things that's really important I want to stress is that if you're sending out bids and they're coming in over the cap, or the waiver or cap, do not be scared off by that. Those are really good ones to send to us to look at. There are other funding sources out there that we might be able to seek, or the family may even want to contribute towards the cost of that. So that second sheet on the bid will incorporate any contributions that are being made towards the bid. So if it goes over the cap, we can show that that funding is going to come someplace else before it gets final approval through the regional office for the requested amount from the regional office. A couple things here's some things that I've run into, just so you're aware, is that there were some projects that were started. And what we found out is that the family wasn't happy with some of the quality of the work that the contractor did. And the situation where we've had to go in and remediate is that the contractor has already billed for that service. And so basically they were getting paid and it's completed in their eyes that it was done, but the family did not like the quality of the work. So those often come to me to go meet with the contractor, the provider. We sit down and we look at what was done, the quality of the work, the expectation, and hopefully we can get the contractor to come back in and fix those items. If it is something that was truly not done correctly or was not part of the bid process, or there was a shortcut taken on that process. We recently had one where there was a hole put into a wall to run electrical, and the situation ended up being that the contractor, and we're still negotiating on this one to some degree, but the contractor, it was not going to do, they were going to patch the hole, but not, and paint just where the hole was, but the family wants the whole room painted. So that's just an example where we go in and negotiate those things. Another one that I recently was involved in, and I got a feeling that the support coordinator's on the phone today, is one where we're looking at a modified bathroom to go in, and we really looked at what the needs were, because doing the project, there were a number of things that that eventually the individual may need, but right now they just need the accessible shower. And so when the contractor did the bidding, they put a number of other things in there. And when we sat down and said, what are the true needs of the individual right now? And we met with the family. They said, we just need the accessible shower. Well, that's definitely going to change the whole bid and the amount of that bid and what's going to be done. We also work with the support coordinator on the writing of the ISP for the needs to be so that they're clearly defined. We don't, I look closely at those things to see what things are saying when they're talking about being repaired or something like that, because the word repair in a document indicates that, it's going to give us a heads up that that's probably not going to be part of a home modification service. Repairs need to be done prior to. Also, we run into situations where the contractor gets in there and they find out the structure is not going to be able to support the current modifications that are being requested, and we may have to set and work out a system or a way to get the structure up to snuff before the contractor can come in. We recently had one where the home was in really not in a very good shape and actually we had to have somebody come in and do some fumigation and cleaning, another company come in and do all this cleaning prior to the contractor even being able to start the work. So those are the kinds of things that I often get called in on to walk through, discuss those things, work out a plan on how it's going to get done, and also negotiate and mediate a situation where there's been some disputes. So it's really great to be able to provide this service for individuals. It helps keep the individual in their home. It can help the caregivers with their jobs and supporting the individual. And we want to make the project and the modification available so that it supports everyone that's going to be caring for the individual.
Okay, I see that we are creeping up on the 12:30 mark, and we could just keep going and going and going and talking in more and more detail. But I hope that provided some overview and some real life application as to experiences we've had with working with folks, and maybe how our team can be utilized. So no matter where you are in the phase of it, if you want us to come on in the planning phase, we're more than happy to help assist and provide some guidance in that area. Or if it's something where it's through the consultation phase, because there's that criteria for 5,000 over, and that's how we get involved, totally appropriate. We really want to be of a support to you guys. In our last minute, Chris, I see a couple of questions in the chat that maybe we can address quickly. One being that can the consultation process be used for vehicle modification? And the answer is yes, absolutely.
Yes.
This is the same thing. It falls under the EAA umbrella, so we would absolutely follow that same process and provide any guidance at any time. Another quick question, which is a great question, because this is so pertinent to our world today. How long is a reasonable wait time for the contractor to begin? I was told 4 months, then it turned into 6, 8, 9 months. That is an area where, like Chris does define that, our contractors are private sector folks. Unlike some of our other waiver services where that we are their primary funding. In these situations, we are not. So we go on more or less what I'm going to refer to as a wait list along with the private sector. And right now we know they're experiencing supply demands. We know that they're having employee difficulty, and for whatever reason, the entire world is using construction workers right now to remodel and whatnot. So what used to be maybe a couple month process is now extending longer and longer. And unfortunately, we can't control that. We can maybe call and help provide some assistance in trying to see and navigate that process as to how quickly it could occur. But ultimately, we're not going to be able to control that. So I think that's one thing to really be aware of when you're working with families, is to let them know the current situation worldwide. It's not specific to just our division that is going on. And so it's really a very important part of the planning process.
And I think, I was just going to mention too, another situation that we most recently have gotten involved in is that when you look at the definition of environmental accessibility, it talks about those physical adaptations required by the ISP to ensure the health, welfare, and safety. We have seen a few that are coming through for behavioral needs in the homes and modifications in the home. So we're really having to take a close look at that. And if there are some of those, it's really important that there's also a behavior support plan that goes along with those. It indicates those needs. And so we clearly understand what we're doing there, because a lot of the contractors are not used to working on behavioral modifications in a home. And sometimes that will hold up the process as well until we work through that.
Yeah. And a lot of those behavior concerns may actually fall under prohibitive practices. And so therefore it would not be something that waiver dollars could be used on either. So again, that's why we have the inability to give generalized responses, because every situation is going to be looked at uniquely. I think our last question, because we're just a little bit over, so we'll try to rush through it, is for required reviews, does UDAT have authority to deny a request, or do they just make recommendations that UR is likely to follow? And while we are not the UR process to ultimately say yay or nay, we do review those components to ensure that the criteria is present. And so it's somewhat of a pre-review for UR. So if they do see that those components aren't present, or that the it doesn't fit within the waiver definition, a lot of times they do take our recommendation. However, I can also say that there's been situations where everything was in place. It looked like it would be something that was approved, but UR did not feel that there was enough justification for the service, so they denied. So it can definitely go both ways, but there are some UR coordinators that I work pretty closely with, and we do have a lot of communication, and they can see the form that we send back to talk about which areas we have recommendations, and then what areas maybe don't fit within some of those required components. So if you guys have additional questions, we encourage you to reach out to us through that email, the Technology First and Universal Design. We'll be more than happy to continue to do some of these webinars or these lunch and learns. We are gearing up, like Chris said, to do an OTPT evaluation webinar. And then what we're looking to do next is also one that is more specific to service coordination and maybe the role and supports that we can provide in those specific areas. So we know we went a little bit over. We're sorry about that, but we appreciate you guys hanging on. And again, if you have any questions or any feedback that you can provide us to how we can better provide assistance for you guys, let us know, because we are absolutely happy to do that. So have a great rest of your day, and let us know if you have any kinds of questions. Thank you.
Thank you.